really quick, there's just, I think, two things that came to mind when Patty was talking and wrapping up right up here. And one of them is this. I briefly spoke about how about 10 years into having epilepsy, I started to be okay with it and started to talk about it. And I want to share that story with you because I think it's interesting. So I actually, through kind of a series of events, I ended up as the first DJ ever on the news, the morning news. So I was on the Emmy Award-winning KTLA morning show down in Los Angeles, actually won an Emmy for it, and was essentially, I know you're thinking to yourself, DJ on the news, how does that work? I essentially was like the Paul Schaefer of the morning news. So instead of having drums, though, I had my turntables and was DJing as we went to break, was also a personality on the news. Prior to that, I had several TV shows that I produced and hosted. But the news gig was crazy. I mean, that was the first time anybody had ever seen anything like that, and it allowed me to reach a lot of people, particularly in the Southern California area, but kind of abroad too. And around the same time as I was on the news and I was getting more and more sort of recognition for my work, I had my publicist at the time, and him and I went to lunch one day, and he said he obviously had known about my epilepsy and had known about my situation. And we were at lunch, and he said to me, you know, you should really share your story. Your story is such a great story, and I think that you need to share that with people, and I think it would be helpful for people. And I just kind of dismissed him and was just like, no, I don't want to share my story. It's a pretty personal thing. And he was like, that's exactly why you should do it. And I was still fighting him. After all, I was paying him, so I was like, no, look, we're going to do what I want to do here. And then he said something to me which absolutely changed my life. He said, you know, I'm bipolar. And I looked at him and I said, what? Are you kidding me? You don't look like you're bipolar. And he said, and I was like, so now I have a bipolar publicist. And so I'm like, you don't look like you're bipolar. And he says right back to me, he says, you don't look like you have epilepsy. And from that point on, it changed my perspective incredibly as to, number one, what epilepsy was, number two, who's affected by epilepsy, and what epilepsy even looks like, So we decided to share my story. And we did it around the national walk, the first ever national walk. Jed, my publicist, had reached out to, at the time, which was Epilepsy Therapy Development Project, now ETP. And we started with the walk, and we did a piece on it, and KTLA decided to run it. And it was the first time that I was then now public about this. And what was really interesting is that, for those, I don't know how many of you watch like a morning news program, but I had no idea the type of loyalty that people have to their like morning news. Like you feel like these people are family. Like you see them every morning. It's a daily routine. And I never really thought of it in that way. I was in college at the time and was not getting up early enough to see the morning news. So, but, quickly realized that then, I became a part of these people's daily routine and their life and whatnot, and they knew me as what they saw on TV. And then, kind of a year into me being on the news, now we're running this story about me and my epilepsy. And so I think for the family that was, the extended family of mine that was out there, that were, faithful viewers of the news, to them it kind of came as like this huge surprise and this huge shock, which later then sparked some different ideas, which I'll talk about really quickly. But we ran the story, and as soon as we went to break, there were 4 anchors sitting at the desk. And I'm here, and the 4 anchors are there. And we cut straight to break after we run the story. 3 of the 4 anchors came up to me immediately after with stories that they had about epilepsy. One of them said that his sister has epilepsy, and this is the first time he's ever talked about it. And you know, another one of the anchors, that their best friend growing up in school had epilepsy and had a seizure in front of them, and now they were talking about it, and it was amazing to see like what had then happened. And I had no idea that. I mean, for the first 10 years of this, I thought that I was the only one. I was the only one that I knew that had been affected by this. And so I think what was really amazing about the whole thing is I've come to the realization that, yes, we talk about epilepsy in a room full of people who are obviously affected by epilepsy, and I think like we all share that experience. But we're in a room full of everybody who already knows that we're connected in that way. I can probably promise you that in any other given situation that you're in, that there is somebody else in the room that is affected by epilepsy. And I can't encourage you enough to try and let that be known, to take that first step, and to not necessarily, you shouldn't necessarily walk into the room with like a banner, like that I have epilepsy banner. But I think it's just really interesting because I never thought about it like that. I just updated my my Twitter status to put on there that I, am a spokesperson for epilepsy in my status, and I don't know why I didn't do that before, but I think little things like that definitely help. And I think for all of you who are out there, I think on one side of it, yes, find these organizations and find these people who have this in common with you. But I think the bigger challenge is to find the people who aren't so, like, where it's not so clear that you're connected to these people. And they're definitely out there. As soon as I became a spokesperson for epilepsy, I can't tell you how many times I get messaged from people in all parts of the world who will just reach out on Facebook, or who will find my email somehow or find my website somehow, and like will send me a message in that way. And I'm no different than anybody else in here who has epilepsy. I mean, there are occasions in which I have a larger platform possibly, but that's the one thing that this technology has really done, is that it's opened up all of these sorts of lines of communication that were never really there before. So you don't necessarily have to be traveling the world in order to meet these people, or to be present and affect these people in some way. The last thing that I'll say is I realized, too, that there was another instance in which I was public with my epilepsy, and it wasn't as impactful as the morning news. But when I graduated from UCLA, I was asked to give the keynote speech at my graduation. And the speech that I gave actually involved epilepsy, and I didn't realize this until years later. But I guess the main concept of the moral behind what my speech was really about was that everybody has their challenge in life. And I think it's so ironic that I was diagnosed with epilepsy when I was 17, and a cocky high school kid who thought that I had it all. And that then God hands me this challenge and says, okay, here, like, this is then your assignment, is to get over this and overcome this, and then share that with people. And I think everybody has their challenge, and for me it's epilepsy, for some of you it's epilepsy, but I think that everybody has that challenge, whether it might be another condition, it might be diabetes, heart disease, maybe you come from a broken family, maybe you have some other sort of hardship that you went through, you got fired, you're unemployed, you're going through a divorce, like whatever it might be. I think everybody has these challenges that come up in life, and they're no different than going through something like epilepsy. And so I think like there is that common thread that binds all human beings together, which is that struggle and that challenge and overcoming that challenge. And I think that that's not necessarily an experience that is unique to the epilepsy community, but that's a human experience. And I think the more that we think about it like that, I think we open up the epilepsy community to be much larger, and for people to be welcomed into these sort of discussions and these conversations and whatnot. So I guess more than anything, I know that I've been pretty conscious of trying to share my story, and I think now that I now am at the old age of 31. I'm trying to. In the entertainment world, it's actually now I'm over the hill. But a part of this is that I think for me a personal goal of mine this year, and I set out to do this at the end of last year, and I was talking to Kim about this at the end of last year too, was that I really want to find more and more ways of being a resource, being an advocate, putting my story out there, encouraging others to do so as well. And I think the more that we are talking about this, the more that we're sharing our stories, the more that we're sharing our accomplishments even as individuals, that, you know, that's all steps in the right direction. So if there's anything that I can do for any of your organizations or any of your communities in any way, I would be more than happy to and more than pleased to do so. So thank you for being here. Thank you for ETP for putting this on. And by the way, I don't know how many of you know this, but this is the first time that there's been a family day at these pipeline conferences. And I don't know about you, but I feel like it was a huge success. And so thank you to the folks at ETP for that.
Hapa doesn't even have to leave the microphone. I'm just going to say thank you to Hapa for being a great inspiration. But I want to thank Patty, all of our speakers today, our staff for putting this on, and all of you guys here for a fantastic conversation and for your inspiration. So with that, let's have some refreshments and talk further. Thank you.